Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have another podcast episode for you where I get to sit down with Runjeet Singh, an antique arms and armour collector who has recently been appointed an expert on BBC's Antiques Roadshow, exhibited internationally and in the UK, sits on the board of directors of Asian Art in London, and is a member of both the British Antique Dealers Association and the Council of Arms and Armour Society. Today we're going to discuss how Runjeet Singh became a dealer and a collector, his experience on BBC's Antiques Roadshow and his future on the programme, the general perspective of South Asian arms and armour, similarities and differences amongst arms and armour within the Indian subcontinent, how to tell if an item is genuine or fake, whether modern man is really unable to recreate Damascus or Wootz steel, and obviously any mistakes to avoid. We talk about a whole lot more, so please make sure you watch this until the end, and in the meantime please make sure to like, comment and subscribe, as it means a lot more to us than you can imagine. Putting all of that aside, let's get straight into this podcast.
I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for your patience with me. I know you've been trying to get me on for, I don't even know, a year. You've got the patience of a saint, so thanks for your patience with me. And
No, it's fine.
I've got to tell the listeners, you even had to put up with one of my meals that I cooked to you. January, I think.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I had to put up with it. I actually really enjoyed it. So it was nice,
You
actually.
lied.
I'm just happy that we've finally got to sit down and talk. So thank you. So as we do with all our guests, we'd like to get to know them a little bit more. And obviously we want to discuss arms and armour today in more detail. But before we do that, could you kind of give us a brief background of your family, your upbringing, and then obviously how you went from wherever you were into arms and armour and where you are today?
A pretty unremarkable upbringing, Amar. I am the child of immigrants, obviously Punjabi immigrants to the UK. Working class family. My dad was a factory worker. My mum was at the very end of her career. She was a dinner lady in a school. And, as far as my childhood, I'm a middle child, and I went to an all boys school. And I was fairly academic. Out of the three of us siblings, I was the most academic, shall we say. But being a middle child, I'm the one who did not go through a kind of a formal academic education. So I was kind of steered into having a typical kind of Indian family usual job, engineer. I was steered towards having a very usual, regular, stable career. And in fact, at school, I remember I was good at art and good at music and good at English literature and languages. And I was terrible at science and maths. And, I just about scraped through. So it kind of didn't make any sense for me to become an engineer, but I did. And then probably at the age of 24, when I kind of cut the apron strings, I ditched the engineer job and became a policeman. Not many people know that about me. I was a policeman for 8 years. I guess it was just that kind of testosterone. I needed to do something other than be in an office. And then once I got that out of the way, 2015, I became a full-time antiques dealer. I became full-time and art and antique dealer in 2015, but I've been collecting since, age 19.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to go back slightly to first your parents. Do you know much about when that took place, why they came over, and a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you asked. I mean, my parents were fairly conventional routes. It was actually my grandfather who first came over, kind of did a recce. He came over for a little while, checked it out, and went back again. And then his sons, my dad and his brothers, eventually came over in the mid-70s. So we're talking 75. So my grandfather came over, did a recce, I don't know, probably late 60s, early 70s, to the UK. But my grandfather's brother, his only brother, went to East Africa and ended up settling there. So one half of my dad's family were in East Africa and the other were here in the UK. And then, of course, with what happened in East Africa with Idi Amin, that side of the family also came over to the UK. And so we had two sections of the Baines family. I'm a Baines, from the Baines clan. And one section, I was from the Birmingham section or clan, and then we had a Coventry half as well.
The other thing then I wanted to ask you was, obviously, the jump to become a police officer?
It was kind of a childhood dream, for me to be in the army, actually. and I put it down to those the Sikh bloodline. As I said, the testosterone. So I wanted to be in the army, and my parents were dead against it. And as I said, they kind of coerced me towards kind of a more typical, stable career path. And I know, kind of, on one hand, I wanted to be in the army. On the other hand, I was really good at the arts at school. So it's kind of a strange mix. But I really think now, finally, I'm a late bloomer. I think I found the happy medium. I'm in the art world, but I'm definitely still involved in the kind of the military side, the warrior side of things. I think I finally found my happy place.
Nice. No, that is awesome. You said you started off your collection at a young age. So if you could kind of explain a little bit about how that first came about, and then how that evolved into taking it full time.
To go back to my late teens, I don't know, 18, 19, I met the Singh, who was doing martial arts. Sundar and Jagga, actually, they're brothers, Sundar and Jagga Singh, both from Coventry. And I started training martial arts with them. And it was suggested to me that why don't you get yourself an antique sword, to practice with, because the balance is much better than your modern weaponry. The geometry of the blade is far superior. So yeah, that's what I did. I went and bought an antique sword from an antiques fair. I think I paid like £50 for an 19th century Indian sword, talwar. And I got the bug. I went back and again to this antique fair and various antiques fairs. And before I knew it, I had like my own mini armory. And I thought, okay, it's time to switch things up. As a collector, with any collector, you might start at something quite reasonable in price, £50, something quite basic. And then quickly you move on and you get something a little bit better and you improve your collection. And it was a very natural evolution for me to do that. And I started selling and buying other things. And, it was just a snowball effect, which kind of culminated in becoming so focused on, bettering the collection, buying and selling, that was actually getting in the way of work, and then coincidentally, I had an injury at work, and they put me on desk duties, which is completely boring. That's not why I joined the police force. So I had time on my hands, and I said, why don't I, like the wages I'm getting from work, I put them in a separate account, don't touch them. Let's see if I can become a dealer and live off the money I make as an art dealer. And so it was an experiment. That's what I did, and it worked. And I put my notice in, and and the rest is history. And then I haven't looked back since. Yeah,
that is amazing. That's awesome. Just your comments about some of like the antique blades being better in terms of geometry and other such features. Could you just explain like why that is perhaps the case?
I think traditional sword making became, like a lot of the traditional arts, died out, and modern warfare came along, and modern fashion came along, and so arms and armor were not needed for either warfare, or traditional arms and armor were not needed for warfare, nor for the traditional dress, the Indian attire. And so they kind of lost the skills. So your modern blades, I mean, there are great, swordsmiths kind of rekindling that now, but your modern blade will never stack up to a traditionally made, thousands of years old recipe of the materials they used, how they used those materials, and how they forged that steel. And again, the balance, the traditional swordsmiths were working with, especially the better swords, they were working with the patron, and it would be custom made to that person. So, they would look at the height, the build, his reach, his hand size, how the sword was used, and I've no doubt those traditional sword makers also knew how to wield a sword in the traditional ways. So it would be made with all of that in mind, and a modern sword maker can't really compete with that. So for a £50 antique sword, then that £50 sword is probably worth £150 now. So it's still very affordable. You're getting this amazing piece of history that can't really be matched.
Like, just in your explanation there, it's obvious that you've had to do a lot of research and kind of understanding around arms and armor, as in it's not just so straightforward as, oh, we'll just buy this and it will work or whatever. Could you then just tell us a little bit more about what you do?
I mean, there is kind of a formula which I've kind of come up with, which works for me, a kind of business model, if you like. But the essence of it is over 20 years of, I'll tell you my secret. And to those who I've spoken to or advised, it's not a secret. I'm happy to share this. My secret is handling objects, getting objects in my hands. There's nothing that you can do to recreate that. You can create the best technology in the world, virtual technology or whatever, but going to antique fairs, going to museums, going to visit collectors and other dealers, I did that I'm still doing it, and you formulate a kind of a picture book in your mind. You remember how something looked. You remember when you've seen real things. You remember those, why they're real, how they felt, how they looked, the materials, the composition, the balance, the size, the proportions. Then that's how you become. I hate the word expert or specialist, whatever you want to say. And alongside that is the research. Poring over books, visiting museums, speaking to other collectors, dealers, academics. So once you've got that knowledge in place, then my business started. Then I could make a plan. Do I want to do an exhibition on Rajput weapons, on Sikh weapons, then go and source the objects that I want, and then the sourcing has to go through a whole checklist of my own. Is it right? What date is it? Where was it made? Who was it made for? All of those things, and also kind of an aesthetic. I'm going for a certain look. The exhibition has to have a theme or make some kind of sense for those who view it. And I could go on, but there's photography, there's research, there's conservation involved. It's a whole. It's quite a thing, quite a long process to do what I do, to present new objects to my clients. It's a very, very long process.
Just on the observation thing, could you perhaps give us an example that you've had kind of in the time that you've been in this area where you've had to conserve something or restore something, perhaps? Has there been something you found that, I don't know, for whatever reason is damaged, or sometimes, I don't know, there's that, I always use the example of, I can't remember, but there's that art, it was a monk, I can't remember what area of art it is, but there was a monk that they needed to restore, and the restorer basically painted literally like a stick figure on top. I'm sure it's not the same.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not the same, but that's the kind of image people, when people say restore or conserve, that's the kind of Mr. Bean-esque kind of idea we get.
I'm best known for Arms and Armour, and I'll tell you an example in a second. But I do also buy and sell and collect for myself as well sometimes, paintings and works of art. So I've definitely seen paper restorers and restorers who specialize in works on paper or canvas work magic. It's really amazing what they can do. There was a painting which I temporarily owned, which somebody had stuck down with glue onto cardboard, and I thought, there can be nothing done with this. But the restorer, using various techniques, managed to remove it, using steam and I don't know the exact process, but it's pretty amazing what they can do. And we've all seen, or maybe some haven't, but TV programs about the subject, Fake and Fortune and things like that. And it's pretty amazing the technology they're using. But in relation to Arms and Armour, I bought a collection of armour, so chainmail shirts and trousers and helmets, and it was from the estate of somebody, a fairly prominent collector in New York, who died. And a dealer friend of mine bought the entire collection, and I met him in a car park, and he had all these shirts of armor.
Doesn't sound dodgy.
Yeah, these are like 16th, 17th century. The dealer was from the continent, and he drove over to meet me. So we met down South London somewhere.
Sounds like Snatch when they're like having to get the jeweler out. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
It does. People, when I tell them I'm an arms dealer, they think of all kinds of things. That's an international arms dealer. But I promise you, most people I deal with are very mild mannered and nice. But he literally pulled these chainmail shirts out and put them on the ground, and they were just covered in rust. And they were like late 16th, early 17th century chainmail, and some of the most important, rarest types I'd ever seen. And I immediately bought the whole collection. And I got it back and put it all together. Okay, this chainmail shirt goes with this helmet, and these trousers go with this shirt. And I got, there's, I don't know, 4 or 5 sets or something. And one of the sets was missing a helmet. I thought, that's strange. And I rang him. I said, there's a helmet missing. Was there ever a helmet? And he, very sheepishly said, oh, yeah, I sold it to somebody else before I met you. And anyway, I tracked it down. I tracked the helmet down and put it all back together again. And that's part of, the really enjoyable part of my job, is being able to preserve things for future generations. And that set went on to a museum, actually. So that's really nice. But the whole restoration, conservation more, we didn't really, there was no restoration per se, but it was conservation. So just preserving it for the future. There was lots of work to be done because it was covered in rust. Painstaking work.
What part of the world was that armor from? Was that also from like the subcontinent?
So it was from Bijapur, which is the Deccan, but it's well known for being the Bikaner Armory, which is nowhere near Bijapur, which is Bijapur is down south in the Deccan, not far from Huzur Sahib, I suppose, that kind of area. And then Bikaner Armory, which is what it's most well known for, is in Rajasthan. And the kind of history is that Anup Singh, the Maharaja of Bikaner, had allied himself with the Mughal emperor at the time, and was sent as a general, as a Mughal general, to Bijapur, who were not kind of falling into line. And there was the siege of Golconda, siege of Adoni, in the late 17th century, late 16th century. And the whole armory was captured and brought back to Bikaner, where it stayed until there's different dates of when things came out, but I think the last time anything kind of left Bikaner was the 90s. And the old dealers in the trade, the old kind of English dealers, British dealers, all tell me the same story, that some Indian guy from India pulled up at a fair in London and walked around the fair saying, I've got, 500 chainmail suits in my van. Do you want to buy them? And they all thought he was mad. And they all said no. And the one or two that did believe him went on to buy the whole armory. And now those shirts are quite valuable. They're a really good investment. That's where they're from. And the trade is full of those funny stories. That kind of that more recent history of the object's quite interesting too.